1. This did not happen to me. This was when my mom was younger. Don't know her exact age though, but my one aunt was a baby at the time. This is my mom's story. When she was younger, her aunt, my great aunt, would watch her and her 3 other sisters while my grandparents were away. Well, one time they took a trip to the Keys, and my great aunt stayed with the girls. Some backstory on the house. It was built in the 17 to 1800s, back when the white people in my area used natives as maids. I have no idea who built the house, but my great-great-grandfather bought it from them, not knowing the whole history at first. Well, the man who built the house got one of the maids pregnant, and she died in childbirth, and the child was supposed to have died soon after. When my grandparents owned the home, creepy shit always used to happen. I've heard so many stories it's not even funny. So everyone knew the house was haunted and really effing creepy. Back to my mom now. Well, midweek my aunt, who was a baby at the time, was sleeping in her crib while everyone was in my grandparents' room reading a story before bed. A few chapters into the story, they hear a baby crying. My great aunt went over to check on my aunt, and she was sound asleep. They went back to reading, and about a half hour, 45 minutes later, they heard it again. My great aunt told the girls to stay where they were and went to go find out what the heck was going on. While my mother and her older sister didn't listen and followed behind. Mind you, this is a pretty large house. They went down the stairs to the first level and searched the sunroom, living room, music room, and kitchen. Didn't find anything, and the crying stopped. They went back to continue their book, and all went to bed. Well, about an hour or so after they were in bed, my great aunt comes in and wakes my mother and her older sister to come down and check the basement out with her. They could hear the baby crying again and reluctantly agreed. So they went down to the basement. It's a large basement with red shag carpets on all the walls, and it splits off to something similar to a boiler room but with a washer, dryer, and water heater thing with a flood drain by the back wall. While walking, they hear it getting louder. Right as they get to the washer room, as they're coming around the corner, they hear a shrill baby scream, and everything went completely silent. Needless to say, they all ran upstairs, got my baby aunt and the other sister, and all slept in my grandparents' room till morning. The baby was never heard crying again, but all my aunts, mom and grandma, swear they used to see the native woman walking through the house, just looking and wondering. They never felt a malicious presence from her, just kind of a lost feeling. My other aunt lives there now and claims nothing happens anymore, but I personally will never go into that house alone. 2. I'm 26. It's funny how the older you get, you look back and piece things together. My eldest brother Sean, such a good guy, born in 1984 in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin border. His room and crib were set up. My mom, big-bellied, 7 months pregnant, started sweeping the room and hallway leading to it. My father on the sofa in the living room watching TV. Sidebar, he was pretty lazy, he died in 2013. As my mother swept closer to my dad, she said calmly, "Don, look," and saw a man, a shape of a man, the silhouette of clothes on, bald but transparent, swirls of dark grey blue. He lifted his arm to point into the bedroom that would soon be filled with my oldest brother. My mom and dad were scared. The shadowy figure disappeared. This happened over and over, all times of the day for weeks until Sean was born. They lived there for 2 years more, never to see the figure again. Same story each time. He'd appear, point, disappear, about 5 seconds. They tried talking to it, nothing happened. It would look at them, barely any facial features. My mom and dad divorced in 1991. I was 6 months old. Sean was always a good big brother. When Sean was 12, he was put on Ritalin. He kept telling me there was a Martian under his bed pointing at him. Sean, being an 80s kid, loved E.T., and every time he said this I thought of E.T., Figured he was being creative. My mom and dad moved states apart, and in 2007 my dad told me a story of how a shadow man would appear outside Sean's bedroom and would always point at the room he'd soon be in. My mom and dad never agreed on anything. They hated each other since the divorce. I visited my mom later that year and asked her to recount the story. She describes the same thing. I asked her what she thought it was, and she said an angel. I don't buy it, but that's her prerogative. My dad died in late 2013, and a few months before he died, he promised he'd visit me. A few months before that, I asked him about the shadow man, and something really stuck out. He said, "What do you mean, a shadow man?" He was colored beautifully with blues, reds, purples, and greens swirling around. I was dumbfounded. My mother saw the same thing, same man, same shape. They both saw two distinctly different colors. I told him Mom said it was dark. He said, "Yeah, she did say that in the 80s. I figured she was lying. Your mom's as blind as a bat." My dad died. I haven't seen him. Fast forward to 2017. My husband and I bought a house in New Jersey. I haven't thought of any of this crap in years. I come home from work and my husband, who I never told this story, tells me there was a shadow of a man running past his computer room. He was frantic. He kept saying it was maybe an ocular vision or something like that. Perhaps a fly flew close to the light source and made a human-like shape. Not sure if it's related, not sure if it's paranormal, mass hallucinations, ocular illusions, or what. But I find it fascinating. For reference, the first occurrence happened in Fox Lake, Illinois. 3. Alright, so here it goes. This is the story of something I experienced which I cannot explain. What I am about to describe happened over a year ago, but a close friend of mine has convinced me to finally put it on the internet for others to ponder. Maybe someone can help me make sense of it. This friend and my wife are the only two people who know about this up until now. I would like to make sense out of it, but it's not something I can just talk to people about. Let's start with a little bit of background before you ask, "What the heck are you doing in the middle of Death Valley alone anyway?" I have two professions. I am an army officer, and I am an adventurer. I do outdoor stuff often as a way to recharge and refocus, because leadership does not come naturally to me as an introvert. Being in crowds is bad enough. Organizing, training, and leading crowds using every last drop of charisma is something else entirely. That's why I get away as much as possible. I seek out places of beauty and solitude which allow me to rest internally, even if it requires physical exertion to get there. If you're heavily introverted like I am, you know what I'm talking about. So in the summer of 2015, I had just returned from Africa where I was on orders. I was drained. I had to get away. I quickly planned a trip through Death Valley. I would take my street-legal dirt bike, 1,500 miles over several days, through the hottest place on Earth, during the hottest time of the year, just because I knew it would be the most peaceful and relaxing place I could access. Now, I did mention that I consider adventuring a profession of mine. That's because I have spent countless hours adventuring, exploring, just escaping. I consider myself highly skilled at it. And it is also a paid occupation for me, because I document most of it through monetized channels. With that being said, I have seen some unusual, disturbing, and just plain cool things when I'm out and about, especially in the desert. Scavengers that will stalk you for miles hoping you will drop dead and become a meal. Caves which appear to be man-made, hundreds of miles from anything. Traps set to immobilize vehicles or people. Old military equipment. You just see a lot of stuff when you're out there. Generally, it all makes sense though. On this adventure through Death Valley, however, I saw something that just didn't make sense. I had been riding all day through Death Valley. It was very hot, easily over 120 degrees, and there were very few people out there that day. In fact, I hadn't seen anybody for about half of that day since heading towards Ubihibi Crater, but did see one couple in a Mustang just leaving Ubihibi Crater when I got there. That was it. It's not surprising though, because of how hot it was, and because of how far out Ubihibi Crater is from anything else. I headed toward Racetrack Playa, and stopped somewhere between Ubihibi Crater and Racetrack Playa for the night. This is very far from anything, and only accessible by gravel road on one end, and unmaintained harsh trail on the other end. There was nobody out here, for obvious reasons. I unpacked my sleeping stuff and had a meal before the sun went down. I took all of my camera batteries out and hooked them up to charge for the night. I also turned my phone off and put it on the charger as well. I left all that stuff by the bike, which was just off the road. I set up my sleeping bag a distance away from the bike and the trail. I wasn't expecting anybody to come by at all, but it was just part of my tactical plan in case of random bad guys stumbling upon my area. My bright red bike would obviously draw all the attention, and my camouflage sleeping bag would go undetected, allowing me time and freedom to maneuver on any bad guys. I got in my sleeping bag, bringing only my camelback and folding knife and my red light tactical flashlight. Everything else was at the bike. It was very peaceful. It was almost silent out there, it was warm, felt really safe, and was pretty easy to sleep. However, when you're out on your own, you never sleep very deeply. Your mind stays alert and ready, so that little things wake you. That night, there was really nothing to wake me. It was nice. Until about 2 a.m. That's when the event happened. I woke up to the sounds of children, yes, children, in the middle of freaking nowhere. Here I am being woken up by children talking. I was fully enclosed in my sleeping bag, so for a moment I just stayed still to try to figure out what the heck I was hearing. It kept going. The undeniable sound of children talking to each other. I couldn't make out what they were saying. It sounded like it was off 50 meters or so. I called out, "Hello?" Still in my sleeping bag. It stopped for a moment, but continued. Now I knew for sure there had to be kids out there in the middle of nowhere. I sat up, peeking out of my sleeping bag, and turned my flashlight on. I scanned in the direction of the noises, which was the opposite direction of the trail and my bike. They were there. 2 kids, 50 to 75 meters or so out. Opposite direction of the trail, middle of nowhere. They were walking, kind of wandering, looking lost, sounding lost. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but it had that tone of discussion like when you're deliberating to figure out what to do or where to go. I called out again, louder this time. "Hello?" They stopped. They looked in my direction. But they were looking past me. In my direction. But not at me. Like they heard me, but I wasn't even there. I was illuminating them with a very bright flashlight. They should have been covering their faces, but they were just scanning. Like they were looking for me and just didn't see me. They turned back, kept walking, and I just watched them, not sure what to do. The noises and their images faded into the distance. I just sat there. I didn't know what to think or what to do. It was just so bizarre. After a while, I laid back down and just relaxed until it started raining at about 5:30 a.m. That's when I packed up in the darkness and continued with my adventure into the morning. So that's what I saw. I saw children in Death Valley, over 100 miles from freaking anything. Just walking, talking, wandering, then vanishing. Oddly enough, it didn't freak me out at the moment. I was more confused than anything. That's why I couldn't make a decision on what to do in that moment. Now looking back, it's freaky. I had originally posted this in Let's Not Meet, but someone commented that they felt it was paranormal, so the post was deleted. Someone there said it could have been from a family camping nearby. I don't know about that. Why would anyone let their kids go wandering for miles without flashlights on a nearly zero illumination night at 2 a.m.? Their campsite would have to be well hidden too, because I didn't see anything out there before it got dark, or the next morning. 4. My dad is Japanese and my mom is Russian. We thought she was Italian, but she did that whole ancestry DNA a few months ago, and turns out she's not even 1% Italian. On to my experience. When I was younger, before my parents divorced, they would hear me playing in my room when I was young, around 4. When they would check in on me, I would say odd things like, "Oh, you scared them. Why are you hiding?" while looking at an empty part of my room. They assumed that I had imaginary friends. Then one day my mom asked me what they looked like. I told them it was a boy and girl. Me and the boy would play together and he was really funny, but the girl would just sit next to my stuffed teddy bear, Toti. I've had this bear since I was 2 years old. He still sits in the dresser to this day. This would go on for a while. When my parents divorced, my mom and I moved to Texas where my grandmother had settled. My mom bought a house. I was 5 now. One night my mom runs in my room because she hears me scream and then start crying. When she walks in the room, she turns on the light and asks me what's wrong. I'm rambling and crying, doing the little kid heavy breathing thing they do when they cry hard. She says I told her. She's angry I left. I wasn't supposed to leave. She's really mad and scary. She's not little anymore. My mom thought that I had a bad dream, and taking the stress from the move and changes were having an effect on me and giving me nightmares. When she said she smelled something off in my room and had an uneasy feeling in my room, she picked me up and I spent the night in her room. The next day she asked me what I dreamed, and I said I don't remember because the little girl woke up, and she was not little and she was angry I left. She told me I was too old for imaginary friends, and said that I was going to make real friends again soon when I went to my new school. This would happen for a few nights. Finally my mom had enough and would just tell me to go to sleep, and there was nothing in my room. I could see her standing at the door of my room whispering things. After a few weeks I stopped talking about her. After a few years as I was growing up in this house, I would from time to time wake up and see a shadow or something out of the corner of my eye. When my mom remarried, I was around 10 and that's when it started happening again. Whenever I was at home I could hear little voices from my room. I would ignore them and just stay away from my room. My mom was an ER nurse by now, and I was alone for a few hours after school, when she would come home late at night. Some days I would stay with my grandmother when she would work overnight. When I was at my grandmother's house, nothing out of the ordinary would happen except for my pit bull, Baby Bull, who would stand up from time to time on the bed and look around before laying back down on the bed. When he stayed in my room, it would not be strange for him to stand on the bed and growl at thin air. I would gently boop him and tell him it's nothing, ignore it, and to lay down. But the biggest issue happened one day I was staying the night at a friend's house, when my mom and stepdad hear kids laughing in the house. They assumed we came over for me to grab something for the sleepover. They call out and no response. They heard nothing back, shrugged it off, and thought it was kids outside. Then they heard it again. My stepdad walked to my room and walked in expecting to see me and my friends. But it was empty. Nothing was in there. He then walked out of the room, and when he was walking away, he heard the laughter again, except it was not kids laughing this time. He said he got a terrible cold chill and ran to the room where my mom was at and told her what happened. She walked over to my room and she did not hear or see anything, but she did smell a familiar odor. She also freaked out a bit and called my grandmother. She came over and started putting oil and salt around the room, telling whatever was there to leave, even if it meant no harm. As she was doing this, the three of them told me later on that the smell got really, really strong and it was terrible. They then heard Baby Bull crying and whimpering really loud in the living room. My mom called him, but he would not come over. They go look, and they found him cowering in the corner. He would not let any one of them get near him. He was a sweet dog, and it was 100% out of character for him to act like this towards a family member. When I came home the next day, my mom told me about everything that happened. I went to look at Baby Bull and comfort him when he came out of the corner. He was limping, and I noticed dried blood on his mouth. I open it, and the top and bottom right canines are broken or missing. I get furious and blame my stepdad of beating him when I'm gone. They swear up and down they did not touch him. He states, "He's a freaking 125-pound pit bull. Do you think me or anyone can hurt him and get away with it without a scratch?" We then take him to the vet hospital, and he ended up having some soft tissue injuries and a broken front paw and hairline fracture on his jaw. He spent the day and night at the hospital for pain control, and my parents were really apologetic about what happened to my dog. When we returned to the house, I was really sad about my dog and angry. Then I just screamed, "Leave me alone." There was a loud bang in the living room, and the smell started to come back. My mom walked in and said we were leaving, we're going to your grandma's. The three of us stayed at my grandma's for the rest of the week. When I called my dad and told him what was going on, he had moved back to Osaka. He said he would mail me a necklace and I was to wear it whenever Baby Bull would act up, or I would smell something, and to try my best to ignore everything like it was not happening. The noise and smell happened a few more times, but I told my mom and stepdad what my dad had said, and we would just ignore it, and would pet and try to distract Baby Bull when he would growl at things. Eventually the bangs and smell stopped after a few weeks. 5. I would just like to preface this with the fact that I am very skeptical about certain aspects of the paranormal. I believe that unexplained phenomena happen all the time, and that a lot of it can be really spooky. But when someone says, "Oh, this is this specific thing for sure," I immediately have my doubts. I've taken this story to some experts and people that are interested in this sort of thing before, and they've given me their thoughts on it. I honestly think that there might be a reasonable explanation regarding the following events. Perhaps some sort of strange, hyper-specific sort of suggestion, putting these thoughts in the mind of all of those involved. A few years ago, I got a pretty sweet gig cleaning office buildings. You come in at night, clean the building, and do some minor maintenance work before heading home. Each building can be cleaned by a single person, and the company only hires people that seem level-headed, and have experience working alone on this shift. I thoroughly believe my co-workers, and have taken their experiences very seriously. I know that most of them have experience working in big office buildings, alone, at night. The following are events that I have experienced or have received accounts of, in the order that they occurred. First, about 3 years ago, I started working in the building. I would always get this feeling as if I were being watched. Specifically, I would always have this image in my mind of an old woman with long black hair. I would be cleaning something and have to pause, look up, and kind of walk around to make sure no one was nearby. There never would be. Eventually, I got sort of used to it. The first time I went on vacation, one of my co-workers had to cover for me. He was a nice older gentleman, a retired war vet who picked this job up to scrape up some extra cash. When I got back from vacation, he came and found me. He said, "I need to ask you something. I don't want you to think I'm crazy, but do you ever feel like someone's watching you here?" He didn't even give me time to answer before he said, "The whole time I was working in this building, I just felt like an old woman was standing over my shoulder." This startled me quite a bit. I told him what I had experienced, and it spooked both of us out. A few months after that, I had just finished cleaning and had 30 minutes at the end of the night to just hang out and read a newspaper. While I was sitting there, I was suddenly overcame with this feeling that I can only describe as electrical static, where there is a high amount of tension in the air. Right after getting this feeling, I thought I heard footsteps quickly running down a hallway outside my break room. I quickly got up, thinking that someone was there, and saw a door at the end of the hall slam shut. I honestly thought the place had been robbed or something, so ran to the door, but there was nothing outside. I waited until the security guard arrived on his next shift to ask him to replay the security cameras. The only thing you can see is the door pushing open just slightly, then slamming shut, followed by me looking out. The only thing I can think of is that it may have been the building's heating and air kicking on and off, creating a vacuum, making the door open and shut. I worked in that building for a few more months before I was switched to a different one, but I have heard 2 other co-workers who don't ever come in contact with one another make similar claims. I have brought these happenings up to my boss, but they don't really know how to take action, or if they should. The most recent account was a newly hired person a couple months ago. He was assigned to that building, and after a couple of nights, he came and found me. He mentioned that he was uncomfortable about cleaning that particular building, and that he was considering asking for a different one. His explanation was that he felt like someone was watching him, and that he kept thinking of the Wicked Witch. The single scariest experience I had when I was there was this window that they have at the end of the hall. The way that it reflects is slightly distorted. One night while I was walking down that hall to leave, I thought I heard heavy breathing. I stopped and looked around for a minute but saw nothing. When I continued down the hall, the distorted reflection made it appear as if an elongated humanoid was standing right behind me. I think that building just has something about it that gives people the creeps, and has some sort of subliminal messaging stuff going on that puts that specific image into people's heads. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 52. Big thanks to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. 52, that's a number I see quite a lot. It's probably just me, it's probably, there are other numbers that crop up quite a lot as well, it's just that one seems to stick out to me. Probably doesn't mean a thing, but I do notice it. It's probably a DC Comics thing, because they did an event called 52 and Countdown to 52, there's a whole bunch of things where they rebooted their continuity, because, they do that at least once a decade. And they ended up with 52 universes, which I believe has actually since been nixed, and they've brought everything back, which is good. And, well, I'm just rambling now at this point, aren't I? Okay, I'm going to head off for now. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.